Hi, this is Roy Worley. Welcome to the interview show that brings on guests from all walks of life. Yeah, it's here that they tell their stories and delve a little deeper into their lives to see what got them where they are. So grab a drink, have a seat, and relax, because this is the Leo Effect.
So you finally made a name for yourself. Congratulations! But how do you get your name out to the world? Turn to WorldStar PR. The caring, honest, and invested team at WorldStar PR will give you maximum exposure through podcasts, TV, radio, amazing press releases, and red carpet events. They'll ensure that you are worldwide. Jimmy Starr, entertainment guru, and Eileen Shapiro, rock star journalist, will give you the world. So come join the likes of legendary actor Ron Russell, iconic musicians Scott Page and Fred Schneider, world-class designer Sue Wong, TV personality Mickey Burns, and so many more. Check them out on Facebook or on their website, jimmystarsworld.com/WorldStarPR. WorldStar PR, where the world revolves around you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Leo Effects. I am Ray Rumsey, your host, and I am joined today by a bassist, producer, music consultant, and all-around virtuoso. I'm very excited to have him here. He's working on a bunch of projects, and especially one that, you know, if you've been listening to the show at all, you know is kind of near and dear to my heart, but we'll get to that part. But allow me to introduce my guest for this evening, Fabrizio Fab Grossi. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Ray. Thanks, man. Thank you for having me. And hi, everybody.
Perfect. And you know, it's wonderful that you're here. You know, you got some really amazing stuff, but first I want to talk kind of a little bit about your background and your history and what got you to where you are now. And so music, has that always been a thing for you?
Yes, actually, I'm not coming from a music family whatsoever. So there's no musicians or artists in my family. I mean, don't get, not, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it in a diminishing way. It's just that everybody in my family loves music, but no one really pursued a professional musician's career. I
Mhm.
only had an uncle that was an accomplished piano player, but he was also, involved in his own business and all of that. But other than that, it was just like something that, it was actually probably I'm the first one in the family that made such a decision. I always been exposed to Italy, to music. I grew up in Italy. I was born in Milan, and I lived, for a lot of years over there. And then I moved, when I turned 20 to the States, to New York. I came to the States a few times earlier, like a couple of years earlier, because in my late teens, the band that I had in Milan got signed with Sony. And back then it was the end of the 80s. Uh, Record companies used to invest money, I guess, in bands. And so they sent us to upstate New York and to Canada to perform with, Americans and Canadians bands to, just to get more familiar with, the English language and all of that. So that was kind of like an eye opener for me, because even though I listen to all kind of music, obviously being in Italy, Italian music was like a big component, but not, I would say, the strange 80s or even 90s stuff that people might consider. I mean, I don't even know how to define it too, but more for the music from the 50s and the 60s. And actually, that kind of Italian music, it's quite entertaining and actually very, very particular. There's a lot of movies. There is a resurgence, especially in Hollywood in the last 15, 20 years, of that kind of music. And, from the talented Mr. Ripley to Born Identity and a lot of movies, even 007's have that, what's his name, the other one, Ocean 11 and all of that. There is a lot of music from that era. It's quite intriguing. And then obviously, were the classics and all of that. And, there was no, Italy never been really like a rock place, but I was, very attracted by that sound. But to be honest with you, it's always been black music for me. Even when I was a little kid. I remember the first two records that my mom gave me, two singles, and I remember I had a player, like an orange Geloso player, you know, the one that you stick the single in it, and then you just play it, and then it pops back up like a toaster, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember those two, and it's funny because I was really young. I was 3 years old. That was for my third birthday, and I remember that she gave me two singles. One was the Beatles, Obladi Oblada, and the other one, I Can Get No Satisfactions by the Rolling Stones. Um, for some reason, you know, when my mom and my dad and everybody else was around and stuff like that, I always plays the Beatles. But I always played the Beatles. But when everybody was gone and I was by be on my own, it was the Rolling Stones. I guess that was the darker side. It was just coming in, and the thing is, like I said, it was not really like a rock country growing up in the '70s in Italy, but. I mean, yeah, some of the stuff that probably for for the American public or already like oldies, I guess, like stuff like Gene Vincent or the Platters or Elvis Presley and stuff like that. But for some reason, Italy was very, very, very exposed to contemporary music from back then. There was actually black music, Earth, Wind and Fire, Ike and Tina Turner, James Brown, all that stuff, and that for me did it. I mean, I was like, I did not know what it was. I didn't know anything. I mean, it was just, you're a kid, you just worry about play and all of that. But,
Hmm.
some of those sounds, I mean, I know that they were kind of like waking up something in me that was different than anything else. Than any other experience that I would have had when, some other type of music would come out on the radio. Obviously then you get to be a little bit older and to friends and older siblings and all of that, you get to hear other stuff. And but I remember that my main switch in terms of like really music, that I remember that, okay, I like this and I want to do this. There was like I would say three major experience, actually four major experience. One was, and I know that you're gonna laugh when I say this, and even my wife and my daughter, and my friends, they're like, how the hell can you remember that? I don't. It's not that I remember everything that happened in my life, but I guess these things are very important. So I think it was like 1972, and I was 4.5 years old. James Brown with his band was the main featured guest on a Saturday night TV in Italy and in a lot of Latin countries, even on this side of the world, from Mexico to Argentina, Colombia. For some reason, Saturday night is a big family night on TV, and there are shows. I don't even. It's more like a type of Vegas show. Obviously, there is a host, a musical guest. There is all kind of stuff, right? And so a lot of families used to stay home and watch the Saturday night TV event. TV for us was still black and white, and I remember that night James Brown came up with his band, and I found out later that actually Bootsy Collins was on bass,
Oh.
and they played Sex Machine and Get Up Up with That Thing. I mean, I know that from later because I saw footage and all of that. But I remember that when that thing went on, my parents told me that they still remember that I was just glued to the TV. I could not just. I was just shocked. I mean, I was like and I guess half of the, half, probably everyone that watched that show that night, because nobody has ever seen something like that in Italy back then, especially not on TV. That was like the baptized by fire, I would say. And if you just fast forward about 7 years, no, yeah, probably about 7 or 8 years, um, I was spending a month and a half in London. It was a common thing to do in Europe to just go to the UK and just stay with a family, like a student exchange kind of program,
Hmm.
where you stay live in a family for like 3 weeks or so, and you take some English lessons, and just to that kind of stuff, right? And I remember that there were a bunch of friends of mine that were a little bit older. They were coming from Italy and all of that. They were all music, dedicated listeners and avid fans of a lot of bands. And of course, I knew already about AC/DC and and a bunch of course, the Stones and all the classics. But they dragged me to Castle Donington, 1983 was. Um, And it's funny because I mean, that was like one of my my opening conversation when I first met Billy Gibbons, because that night, the Castle Donington, the bill was insane. Diamond Heads, Dio, playing his first show as a solo band with Vivian Campbell, Vinny Appice, and I forgot bass player, great guy that passed away. He used to play with Rainbow. Bane. I don't remember the name. I'm sorry. Uh, Meatloaf, but ZZ Top. That was the biggest festival appearance that they've ever done in Europe. Around that time, that
Hmm.
was when Eliminator was like really ranking in the charts, especially in the States. And then Whitesnake with the original lineup with Cozy Powell, Bernie Marsden, Mickey Moody, Neil Murray, and John Lord. Well, let me tell you something. ZZ Top, it was kind of a shock, because of the theatrics and all of that, and it was like interesting, right? But Whitesnake, it was insane. And when they played "Ain't No Love in the Heart of the City," and you have to consider that there was something like about 100,000 people at that event, and the English festivals were very, very famous back then because people used to throw everything. Like, I mean, I don't even know if I can say these kind of things on the media, but bucket full of urine and pieces of food and everything. So uh, things will quiet down during a band set, but then in between bands, it was like the sky was covered, right? So it was just a madhouse. People sleeping there for 2 nights before. So I would just let you imagine what kind of scenario was, and
Hmm.
probably not necessarily the most appropriate for a 14 years old guy, but like a couple of thousand miles away from home. But then Whitesnake came on, and when they played that song, everything just completely changed, and everybody was singing along, and it was just surreal. And I said, "Wow, this is so cool! I want to so do this." And obviously, I didn't make the connection between Bobby Blue Bland and blues and funk and black music. Obviously, I didn't know any better. And 2 months after that, actually 3 months, in the month of November, I was doing school. Queen came to play in Milan. Actually, I think it was the first show that they've ever did in a place that then, after a few months, collapsed under the weight of snow. We had an insane snowstorm that year, and just the whole scene just. And I remember that I saw Queen, and it was like, oh my god, an otherworldly experience. And my brother was a few years older than me, knew some people that were working in the facility, and we ended up in going backstage, like in this big room where there was like a journalist and stuff. I mean, I didn't know anybody back then. I didn't know anything about what's what's a music critic or anything like that. I was just happy to be there, and I remember that I was like really energized because, of course, the show. But there was like something that when you like. I don't know, when you have like a lot of coffee or something like that, you feel that kind of, rush, right?
Right.
And I couldn't really explain what it was, but then my brother, takes me. He said, "Oh, we need to leave. We need to go and everything." And on the way out, I realized that I was actually giving my back to Freddie Mercury. So without even knowing it, I'm just, was feeling this guy's energy, and I had no wonder that it was like something that it was just insane. And Queen has always been one of my favorite bands. So these are the first three things that really changed my life. And around that time, Bob Marley actually for I don't remember the exact date. It was like probably a little bit more towards the summer. At his biggest show ever in the Milan soccer stadium, there was about 100,000 people. I always loved Bob Marley, and that was the other thing. So these four things, I guess, are these four episodes are what brought me to music. And it was just bigger than anything else that I've ever seen. I mean, I was not interested in anything else. That's pretty much. I mean, my father had his business and all of that, and I should have probably continued on the family trail, but I guess this passion was a little bit actually, it was stronger. The thing is, like, I started to play, and obviously you got your band, you wanted to do demos and all of that. And back then, like I said, Italy wasn't necessarily a rock country.
Right.
So even sound engineers and recording studio, they had their own system, and the type of music that they were dealing with on the day-to-day base was different. So I will go in with, I don't know, like a record from Van Halen or AC/DC. Hey, we want this there again. Just the engineers was like, no, no, this is wrong. What do you mean this is wrong? So it was always like a back and forth, and that's how where I started to get into production. I kind of like had to learn how to figure things out myself, because none of these big professionists were giving me what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then obviously, things get better. You're getting better on your instrument. We started to play. We got our deal, and started to play with on this side of the ocean. And that was like an eye opener for me, like I was telling you earlier, because I, ended up in going to a studio to record a few things, and also seeing the way the technicians and the other bands were working and all of that. And it was like people were behaving like the way I thought musicians should behave, and technicians should behave, and producers should behave, in terms of choices of sound. I'm not talking about the standard things are standard everywhere. It's just the choices, how loud you can be on stage, and how you record drums and all that kind of stuff. So it was not a brainer when my band, like it generally happens with a lot of bands, disbanded. I decided to give the States a shot, a chance. It's okay. Let me try it now, because if I don't do it now, I'm gonna do it when I'm 40 or 50. So
Right.
just and I was already working with a lot of artists and stuff. I was making a great living, even though I was just 20. It was like, somebody probably would have called me like stupid to like leave everything that was going on back then, but that was not the music that I like. And what to be a musician if I don't have to play what I want? Then may as well have another job and make more money, or do not have all the worries and the headaches that you have when you are a musician. So I came here, went to New York, and I joined a band, a guitar player and a drummer. We were doing like a very funabolic instrumental, crazy things. Obviously, then we got a singer. I was in New York for 4 years. I have some acquainted and very, very distant families there. But then I had the chance to come to Los Angeles for a NAMM show. I came to Los Angeles for the NAMM show, and I was, again, another shock. And after a year, I came back, and I moved out here. And I was, of course, I'm just giving you the short, the short story.
Right.
My collaborations with a lot of other artists that grew both in the States, and actually I was still in touch with a lot of people in Italy, and now me living here and having colleagues over there. Sometimes, we would do, work or recordings. I was coordinating things and all of that. And, when I came to the States, when I came to Los Angeles, for a lucky series of circumstances, I ended up joining Steve Vai in the recording studio. I was jamming with the band, and the guitar player in the band happened to be his tech. He's actually studio tech, and Steve was recording something, and my friend Marcelo, that was his name, told Steve about me. That was an Italian guy and all of that. Steve obviously, is of Italian heritage, and funny enough, where his family's from, it's like really like 20 miles from where I'm from.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's from the north, and everybody, because everybody thinks that if you're Italian, you're either Sicilian, Neapolitan, or Calabrese. Well, actually, we have a big part of Italy that it's not in the south; it's in the north too. So and actually, where Giorgio Armani, Puccini, Verdi, and a lot of figures like that are from. I ended up playing with Steve, and those were the years where kind of like the post grunge confusion reigned supreme. So everybody was still into rock, but they couldn't really kind of like determine what kind of rock they wanted to listen to. And I always like all kind of rock, but they had some sort of like a straight appeal for some reason. So I ended up in with a bunch of other friends in running a Thursday night in a club in Hollywood. That was like rock theme, anything from like air metal to hard rock, classic rock, whatever it is, but very not poser, very very street, right? The club was actually quite successful. It was called the Tribe, and a friend of actually was the ex-girlfriend of Johnny Lydon of the Sex Pistols. It was an habitué of the club. She's like, Fabrizio, I want to introduce you a friend of mine as a fellow European of yours. Is a famous singer. I know that you know her. Who is it? It's like Nina Hagen. Which, oh, really? Oh, wow. Because I remember, obviously, growing up in Italy, she's German. So we became friends immediately. And actually, I asked her if she wanted to play a couple of songs there at the club. She says, I would like to do an acoustic show and everything, but um, she made some strange requests and everything because she knew that we had a band. She saw us playing. She says, "But I want you guys to help me out in the studio next week." Okay, so I went to the studio and she gave me this song that she got out of her voicemail recorder. You remember those like little cassettes?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So and that actually was a song that Joy Ramones co-wrote with Lou Reed. And they didn't, back then was not like today. It's like iPhone and digital notes and Pro Tools, and everybody's got a studio at home. It was, it's still old school. Um, they ended up in calling her like in the middle of the night from one of the crazy partying in New York. And they were both playing guitar and singing on their answering machine. And I had to figure the song out. Now, those two guys are not really renowned to have the best pitch or anything like that. I mean, but that goes beyond with those kind of artists, right? Well, if you take that into consideration and the fact that those cassettes had a speed that was their own, it was kind of like difficult to try to figure out what they were playing because it was like it was not flat, it was not sharp, it was the old tape was but we got it out, and Nina was really really happy about what I did. So I became her musical director, and when it was about time to go out on tour, for again thanks to Steve Vai and some other friends that I made, Steve, I consider him as my music godfather. Him and Steve Lukather, they are the two my guardian angels. Those are the guys that gave me my breaks when I got here in Los Angeles. If it wasn't for them, I'm most likely not going to be here doing what I'm doing. Because with Luke, I learned a lot about studio recordings and all of that. Because I was doing a lot of coordination and productions and all of that, and seeing a top guy like that, the work in recording, his work in ethics, and the tricks and all of that. I was just like, I mean, there were people that would pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to be schooled by people like that, and I had the chance to lived it, right there. And Steve on a lot of other stuff. I mean, he was more like the spiritual counselor and all of that. It's just, it gave me a lot of boost, and also, the credibility. I mean, back then, Vi was just fresh out of, David Lee Roth and, Passion and Warfare. And I mean, it's just like probably was the most famous rock guitar player on the planet at that time, if not the one of the top five. So, I mean, you're recording with this guy, and then all of a sudden, everybody starts looking at you like, "Oh man, you got your ass together." So that gave me the opportunity to do a bunch of things and landed my first production deal with Warner, a European branch of Warner. And so I had to call myself out of Nina's band, but I did give her a substitute. It still now is one of my best friends in the world, Johnny Gripperich is a great bass player, and he played with everybody, with Slash, with Pat Benatar, with Johnny Lydon. I mean, it's just like it's one of the top coal guys here in Los Angeles, and almost 30 years later, we're still, very 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 close. So Johnny took up my spot, and I started making records, and I haven't stopped since. that's pretty much the short run.
Yeah, man, you are all over the place. You
Yeah.
really come a long way. And now you're also working on a new like charity kind of thing, and that
Yes.
brings us to one of the major points that I wanted to talk about. And I'll let you say the name of it and go through all of that. But we're definitely at the end of the show gonna have tell people where to go that they can kind of learn more about it if there's a website or anything. But I'll let you take it away as to what it's called and what all it entails.
Absolutely. 5 years ago, thanks to, I'm not going to tell you the whole story because it's a fairly long thing, but thanks to a suggestion by Billy F. Gibbons, I started this band called Supersonic Blues Machine. Supersonic Blues Machine is like a jam band, it's like a power trio. now consisting of Kenny Aronoff, the drummer extraordinary, myself on bass, and Chris Barras, lead vocals and guitar. He's from the UK. We have a bunch of different sidemen with us, but our gimmick is that we have a lot of friends and guests on our recordings and also on tour. Billy being one of them, but there are also Warren Haynes, Steve Lukather, Robin Ford, Walter Trout, Joe Louis Walker, Eric Gales, who I produced several records for. Um, this combination and this actually exposure to some of these cats got me to meet some very, very interesting people. And got me to finally being able to put together things myself and to getting tapped in the back when there are mm, uh, charity or special events that are meant to do something good beyond the actual doing a good show and give people a good time for the night of the performance. Um, and obviously, not to pitch Supersonic Blues Machine, but actually, we're finishing our new record, our third record in studio, and it's going to be released probably in November. So, everyone that listens to the show, please check us out at www.supersonicblues.com. We're on Instagram as Supersonic Blues Machine. Please follow us there, and on Facebook again, Supersonic Blues Machine. Uh,
Right
we have
on,
a
right
very,
on.
very particular record coming out. Again, working and touring and all of that with Billy and all of that, we got to meet some very, very interesting people. And I got asked, I got presented, well, not really presented, but I got to make I became aware of a lot of different things that sometimes people know or hear about, but don't really get the experience to experience personally. And I got to experience first the actual, really how crazy sometimes fans can be when you have some very particular musicians. But I'm not talking about the crazy, like the Beatles mania, the 16 years old girl, with a young Paul McCartney or John Lennon. I'm talking about people that are really kind of like they become attached to what you do and they go wherever you go because they feed out of your music, your lyrics, and all of that. And a lot of these people were veterans. And I got to become friends with several of them. And I got to hear stories. They are not necessarily war stories like everyone probably might think, like, oh, when I was in Vietnam or when I was there. It's not that. I mean, yeah, that's part of it. But the main thing is actually was history, stories of pain and abandonment after the big sacrifices and the big challenges that they had to endure during their tour and the services. And I ended up in meeting a couple of great gentlemen, Patrick Nettesham and Breck Phillips, uh, who run an organization called Guitars for Vets. And I was immediately enamored by what they were presenting. By the way, that's www.guitars for number four vets.org if you guys want to check it out. Basically, there's been studies that prove scientifically, medically proving that music therapy helps a lot to deal with what's, I guess, not celebrated, but the awareness of this condition. It's celebrated in this month of June. It's called post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm sure that the listeners have heard this name quite often, but it's unfortunately it's a very, very sad condition, and it affects the mental health of our vets, boys and girls. Um, Music seems to be one of the best treatment. It doesn't involve chemicals, doesn't involve medication, doesn't involve shock treatments or anything like that. So basically, Guitar for Vets, what they do at this point, I guess what we do is organize guitar lessons or music lessons, music events. We collect gear, we accept donations, and we prepare these music programs where we, buy music equipment for veterans that wants to learn. And there is like different courses where they graduate from, and giving these people something very good and positive to focus on, that it's not just their sadness or the depression or the confusions that generally comes with the post-traumatic stress disorder. And again, this year I was officially named ambassador, and I'm really, really proud of it. And this month we're celebrating, like I said, the first gear drop ever. So everyone that has guitar, bass, a microphone, a pedal, an amp, a piece of gear that it's not using no more. Instead of leaving it in the basement or in the attic or wherever, just to collect dust, please, again, www.guitarsforvets.org. You can see where all the donation centers are. And if you are in Los Angeles or in Chicago, today, you still have time. uh, there was a great actually drop center at the Left Factory. It was actually partner with Guitars for Vets in this initiative. We collected so many instruments here; it was not even funny. I was earlier at the Left Factory with another dear friend of mine, great bass player Carmine Rojas from Rod Stewart and David Bowie fame, who donated some instruments. I brought some guitars as well, and we had a great fun. So we're looking to really expand this and take it to the next level where more people are aware, more people can help us help vets. So that's something that it's very particular. And another thing that it's very important for me is because I have a, um, a personal project. It's a solo project, another musical project that is called Soul Garage Experience. And I didn't want to call it with my name. I just wanted to, make it a little bit more interesting music wise, where I have a couple of other great musicians playing with me. And the particularity of this band is that it's even more like a soul music, soul rock, psychedelic 60s and funk, anything that goes from, again, James Brown to Vintage Trouble, from Rival Sons to Lenny Kravitz and a lot of Sly and the Family Stone. That's the music that I always love. But the particularity about this project is that it's combined with Guitar for Vets. So everything that we do, there is always a portion of every dollar that we make that goes to Guitar for Vets, dedicated merchandise, participation out of tickets, royalties out of records. I mean, our record is going to be released soon, but everything that we already do, it's attached to that. I find it very important that I think I was blessed to have to do what I like for a living, and I understand that artists sometimes have a louder voice than a lot of other common people, but not because they're better. It's just because their position in which they're in, they allow them to talk to way more people that my next door neighbor would do, even though he's probably a better guy than me. And I think that when you have that chance and that power, you should use it to do something good. And I thought that I think again, my giving back to the community and these crazy dedicated fans and music lovers and people that are our vets, I think is just like a good thing. So our match and creating this, our records now and our shows to support this and try to get as many of my colleagues involved. It's been a blast because everybody's been super, super sympathetic and supportive. I have a big shout out to my dear friends Eddie Trunk that has been plugging this thing for the last week, crazy on his shows and on Twitter, and he's got a major pull, and a lot of other local musicians too, and nationwide. So it's just something that it's we're really, really, really happy about it because it's something that again, it doesn't. We don't get to talk politics with this. We don't get to talk black, white, blue, pink, yellow. This is just like everyone is the same. It's somebody is a vet, and that's all it is. And but at the end of the day, beside all of it, is an American. And if that person is in pain or is in need, we, as American, consider myself I'm an American citizen, proud of it, and I think that we have the need and the duty to take care of it. So it's something that really takes up a lot of my time, but I'm really, really happy to do it.
That's awesome. That's absolutely amazing and such a noble cause that, I'm so proud that you came onto the show to tell me about that. And, all my listeners, as usual, make sure to check the podcast description. I'm going to have links to all this stuff. But before we sign off, I just want to say, Fab, thanks so much for coming on the show and talking to me today and telling me about your history and such an inspiring project with Guitars for Vets.
Oh no, thank you for having me, and thanks for everybody who's listening. And again, guys, if you can, anything, whether it's a dollar or a guitar, anything can help. And when you can help somebody that way, you see the results is just really, really uplifting. So it's a good thing. Trust me, these guys are serious. Guitar for Vets is a really, really good organization. Nobody's buying Mercedes out of it. Everybody's volunteering and they're doing what they do because they care. So that's fantastic. And we do this with music. So I mean, what could be better than that? So thank you so much for having me and for giving me the opportunity to talk about this and to talk to your listener. And also, again, if you don't mind, I want to again say, one more time, please, guys, check us out for Supersonic Blues Machine on Instagram and on Facebook. And also, if you guys want to see what I'm doing with my solo project and all the activities with Guitar for Vets on my own, www.fabriziogrossi.com. And I'm on Instagram as Rock and Roll Fab and on Twitter as Rock and Roll Fab, R&R Fab, and Facebook the same thing. So if you follow me or if you follow Guitar for Vets, or if you follow Supersonic Blues Machine, you get all the updates about all these programs and other charities too. Because actually, one last thing, our involvement, especially with my solo project with Guitar for Vets, is part of a larger umbrella, which is a foundation that I just started. It was called Always a Home, that actually deals with another problems that we have here in America, and not only in America. I got, funny enough, dedicated to this, spending my time between here and London with the actual president of the office of our record company in the UK, because he's another great guy that does a lot of community services too. And we have this major plague here in Southern California, in Los Angeles, with the homeless, and in London too. But this is a problem, unfortunately, that is afflicting the whole nation. I mean, majority of the nation, especially in the big city. And it's really sad to notice that a good chunk of the homeless population is, it's formed by veterans. And that's why these two things for me are going together. And that's why I'm so dedicated to the Guitars for Vets and the Always a Home Foundation, because it's actually, they're two work that are, they're touching each other. They're very close. And these are two causes that are very, very close to us. So we always try to do as much as we can. Again, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but when it comes down to these things, I'm getting even more excited than talking about my next record. So, forgive me, guys.
No, it's absolutely fine. It's a very, very good cause, and it's definitely something that needs a little more highlighting, and I really do appreciate you bringing it up and doing so much for that cause. It's really great. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Absolutely. No, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And thank you to the listeners who tuned in to check this out. Thank you so much for all your support and your time. Make sure to click the links and support where you can. Every little bit helps. Just like Fab said, we're all in this together. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye-bye.
Oh, now that was an awesome interview. Thanks so much for listening. You all are so great. And don't forget to head to Facebook, Insta, and Twitter and follow The Leo Effects. If you want to hear some comedy and ridiculous voices, check out Shattered Dungeons on YouTube and all other places podcasts can be heard. And you'll hear me voicing crazy characters, usually pretty terribly. So thank you so much. You all are the absolute best. And we will see you all on the next episode.